So far, I'm feeling very conflicted about this episode. There were a lot of moments that I liked and thought added a lot to the characters and story, but there were also multiple scenes that I felt brought the episode down a lot. The episode does a good job of once again hitting on every storyline, and we're finally starting to see some of them come together. This is personally what I've been waiting for. I've enjoyed all of the varying storylines to some degree, but I've been constantly looking forward to when they would start to overlap and add a greater degree of stakes to the story. The main cause of this comes in the form of Dedra Miro. Now that she is in charge of the Morlano sector, she is able to dig deeper on Cassian and what happened on Ferrix. She starts off by questioning Cyril about the incident, and while it wasn't much, I was glad these two characters finally got to interact. They were promoted as the two main villains, so to speak, of the series, and yet neither one has felt like a massive threat outside of Cyril during a few scenes in the first 3 episodes. While it doesn't look like they'll be joining up anytime soon, once they do, I think it'll help add a genuine fear of Cassian's well-being. Because we know he survives the series, the story needs to create stakes from another source, and while I felt some of that during the heist on Aldhani, there haven't been many other moments when I was genuinely concerned for someone's well-being to the point where I was glued to my screen and had my heartbeat start to quicken. Dedra questions Cyril regarding his numerous requests looking for Cassian, and it's a good callback to when we first met the ISB and learned that they look for germs that could pose a serious threat, whether it be from the inside or out. Well, we know why Cyril is obsessed with finding Cassian because we've been following him. The ISB doesn't know him, and his obsessive need to find Cassian could be seen as a possible threat to the safety and order of the Empire. It's also stated how Cyril was forced to sign Blevins' report of the incident without actually reading it, further proof of his incompetence and lackadaisical nature that caused Dedra to usurp his control over the sector. We didn't see him this episode, but I could imagine this will be brought up by Dedra in a future meeting or argument with him, as their conflict doesn't appear to be ending anytime soon. In a later ISB meeting, Dedra presents her information to Yularen, and we learn that they are familiar with Luthen and what he's done, although to them he's simply known as Axis, which I thought was a nice piece of symbolism. During a later meeting together, Cyril offers little help to Dedra in her search for Luthen, but we do see a bit of their similarities. Both are very aggressive in their attempts to solve problems, willing to go behind people's backs to get information and do what must be done. The way he says it sounds like Cyril wants to be a part of the rebel hunt, or at least help where he can, but Dedra quickly shuts him down and forces him to go back to his small job. It may still be a while before Cyril gets to have a massive impact on the search, but just this small scene with the two of them was nice to see, even if it didn't live up to my expectations. This side of the story was over relatively early in the episode, but the main focus was Cassian in the Imperial prison. He's sent to Narkani 5, which is a much nicer prison than some of the other ones we've seen in Star Wars, especially when compared to what Jin had to go through. Once again, these were the scenes that I enjoyed the least in the episode. Compared to what the other storylines offer, I'm just not seeing any major character or story developments in his scenes other than him being in prison. This could change after the next episode, or after listening to how other fans watched these scenes, but at least for me, right now, I didn't find myself caring that much. As I mentioned before, I think part of that has to do with knowing he survives and not really being concerned with the fate of the character. I know he won't die in prison, and eventually he'll get back in the galaxy, so I just haven't found a reason yet to care about his story at this moment. There were, however, some moments that I did find interesting or enjoy. Cassian and the other prisoners being shocked upon entry took me by surprise, and showed how even the nice Imperial prisons are still brutal, especially with us seeing the officer take joy in their pain. Even though his character doesn't seem to have a major role, I enjoyed seeing Andy Serkis star in the episode, who as always was amazing. I thought that the scene where Cassian is introduced to his group and just stood there watching them work really slowed down the episode, and that was when I really began to become disinterested with this side of the episode. It makes sense for him to be taking it all in, but in my opinion we don't need to see that on screen. It felt too drawn out, and with nothing significant happening, I began to lose interest in the episode. The factory scenes were definitely not for me, but there was a lot to take away from the scenes in the hall. When questioned by the other inmates about the new Imperial legislation and rebel activity, he is able to see the impact that his actions had on others. Last episode he learned that he was blamed for the Empire coming to Ferrix, and now his involvement on Aldhani led to these prisoners' sentences being extended. He helped Luthen just to escape the Empire and make some quick credits, but the mission had a ripple effect on the entire galaxy that he never considered before. And any guilt he feels isn't helped when a prisoner commits suicide in the middle of the night by frying himself, unable to finish out his sentence, which was extended because of Cassian. Even though we didn't get much of Mon Mothma in the episode, I still quite enjoyed the scenes we did get. We see her at another dinner party attempting to gather votes, and we get to learn a little more about the Chandrilan culture, like the drinks, and also how she married Perrin at only 15 years old, a year before she moved to Coruscant to become a senator. Teenagers at that age can still be very moldable in their beliefs, so it's a testament to Mon for staying true to herself and her ideals despite living among the wealthy on Coruscant for so long. It also gives us an idea of how long she had lived that life and how normal it has probably become for her, adding more value to when she finally throws it away and denounces the Emperor. While in the moment she comes off as playful, Mon has a moment where she mentions to Perrin that she may just be better at pretending, and it shows how little Perrin knows about what she's really been doing. Whether it's because she doesn't trust him or because she wants to keep him safe, she hasn't let him in on the secret. While I wasn't a fan of him or their daughter when they were first introduced, I've become fairly invested in the dynamic of the family and how it'll turn out, especially since Mon may have left them both behind when she officially formed the rebellion. Or maybe their deaths were what led her feel that it was time to do it. When Tay Kolma arrives to talk to Mon about their finances, it seems that Perrin has become distrustful of him, or possibly both of them. It may just be because Tay is spending so much time with his wife, or he may suspect that there is something greater being discussed between the two of them. We've already had one jealous lover create a problem on Ferrix, but I wouldn't be surprised if Perrin ends up doing a similar thing and making false charges against Tay. Mon later talks with 3 other senators regarding a new legislation, and while it was short, I enjoyed the conversation and deeper dive into the politics where we start to get to see the various beliefs of senators and how much they are willing to let pass by because they live on Coruscant and are disconnected with the oppression felt by the citizens of the galaxy. The second half of the episode spends most of its time focusing on Ferrix, and this may have actually been what I enjoyed the most. We learn that Marva wasn't bluffing when she told Cassian that she was staying, and that she tried to become a one-person rebellion in her old age, trying to break into the Imperial headquarters in the town. She ultimately fails and is left with a bad knee. Based on her condition in the episode, I don't know if I see her making it out of the season alive. Her death at the Empire's hands, whether justified or not, could end up being the tipping point that causes Cassian to fully embrace Luthen's rebellion. And if I hadn't been watching in the middle of the night, I probably would have let out a small cheer when Brasso came on screen. He's been a minor character, but ever since we first saw him, he's been the character that I look forward to seeing on screen the most, maybe only behind Mon Mothma. We learn that Vel and Cinta are on Ferrix looking for Cassian, and while some have theorized about their relationship, it's seemingly confirmed here that they are a couple. I think it adds a lot more to Vel's character because of everything she has lost so far, and Cinta is the only person in her life that keeps her focused and tells her what she needs to hear. It explains Vel's hesitation to take risks, because it may result in her losing a loved one. I was surprised that we never saw how Cinta got off of Aldhani, and instead it jumped right to them on Ferrix. It was something that I had expected to see, but I wouldn't say that I'm disappointed. As of now, I don't have any emotional connection to either character, so seeing that scene isn't something that I as a viewer cared about that much, but there may be fans out there that do. They go their separate ways, with Cinta staying to watch for Cassian, and I don't point them out often, but I thought the transition between the two points of view with the music was phenomenal. I don't know why exactly it stood out to me, but it made me feel just how important their relationship was to Vel, and how Cinta, who's much more focused and tough-skinned, seems to care only about the objective. Bix later goes to send a message to Luthen, questioning where Cassian is, and Pac is subsequently taken in by the Empire. I initially took it as they discovered the transmission coming from his shop and arrested him, but since they also later took Bix in, It could also be to question both of them about Cassian, since Dedra learned from Cyril that the locals helped him evade capture. After Clea receives Bix's transmission, we get to see more of their dynamic as a team. I've been surprised with how much we've gotten of Clea since she was first introduced, but her challenging Luthen has made me excited to see more of the character. She pressures Luthen into shutting down the radio on Ferrix, and we get to see just how big of an impact Cassian being out there is having on Luthen. I didn't think that it would be a huge deal, but Luthen seems to be genuinely worried about Cassian giving him up, which, if he knows everything about Cassian, doesn't seem completely logical. At least from what we've seen from him, he may not be a team player, but he doesn't stab people in the back either. He was true to his word with his deaths and the mission on Aldhani. I mentioned it in last week's review, but I expect that we'll see Luthen, or someone connected to him, discover that Cassian is in Imperial prison in the next episode, leading to him being broken out in the following episode. We've seen how worried Luthen is, and him learning that the man who knows everything about him is in Imperial custody won't help ease those worries. His part of the episode ends with him visiting Saw Gerrera on Sagra Milo, and based on the trailers, I don't think it's the last time we see him either. Even though the content of the scene wasn't my favorite, I enjoyed getting a taste of the familiar. This show has dealt with a lot of new characters and stories, but Saw Gerrera and his partisans were a nice inclusion that kept me entertained in what was a much longer episode than normal. Luthen offers Saw Gerrera some Imperial technology if he agrees to meet with another rebel to coordinate an attack on the Empire, and it shows Luthen's interest in creating a larger and more organized rebellion to fight back. Saw, on the other hand, seems to be in line with where we see him in Rebel Rising, where he is still very much set on doing things his own way and not risking the lives of his soldiers for someone else's cause. We don't see much of Saw, but he doesn't seem to be too extreme, at least not yet. This is still a while before we see him in Rebels and Rogue One, so he isn't in as bad of condition yet. While I think it's very unlikely, I would love to see Saw and the partisans be included in a major way in a future episode, where we get to see them take on a mission against the Empire and see how their methods compare to Luthen's. Narkani 5 sees the storylines begin to cross paths in an episode filled with highs and lows, earning a rating of 8 out of 10. Let me know what you thought of the 8th episode in the comments below. Remember to like the video, and subscribe for more reviews like this, and remember to follow me on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. Thank you all for watching, and remember, the Force will be with you, always.